Last year's game, Oregon-Wisconsin, was a barn burner in Madison. We could see the very same this year on a crossover edition of Locked On Ducks and Locked On Badgers.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for a crossover edition of Locked On Ducks. I'm Spencer McLaughlin, and Locked On Badgers. That is Ryan Harings, and this is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making this your first listen or your first view every day, your daily source to stay up to date with your favorite teams. We're talking everything that you could possibly need to know until our next crossover, which will probably be in August. Just a little tease on the content there. Everything you need to know for the Wisconsin-Oregon game. That's on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. I'm sure both fan bases remember, Ryan, last year's game was the upset that wasn't. It was right there for the taking. Oregon had a chance early on to kind of pull away, and Dylan Gabriel threw one of his patented red zone interceptions, which he had 4 of last season, and we hadn't seen him in a while. And then all of a sudden it was, oh boy, here we go. And Wisconsin snatched that momentum back. And it was a close game throughout. Oregon was playing its 8th straight Big Ten Conference game. They were doing so on the road. They will not have that sort of disadvantage in the game on October 25th. This year, it is at Autzen Stadium. They will have been at Rutgers the week prior. But I look at this Wisconsin team with one of the toughest schedules under the radar in all of college football and say, you know what? I think the Badgers can beat somebody that they shouldn't in the eyes of the broad general public.
Yeah, gosh, that game last year, you mentioned the Gabriel interception. There was also a Gabriel play on 4th down where he evaded the pocket, rolled up.
4th and 9, baby. 4th and 9 to start the fourth quarter when Dan Lanning played the Uno reverse card on jump around.
Dude, a heartbreaker. Because if you get a stop there coming off that momentum, but that's what mobile quarterbacks do, man. And that's what Oregon did. It was a heartbreaker for Wisconsin. In a season filled with tough moments, that felt like one of the spots where you could have scratched off the jackpot lotto card and made something that you could salvage from it. And it was just a massive disappointment. All credit to Oregon, 8th straight game, come to Madison, winning that game. And you mentioned it, like the script is flipped this year. I'm sure Oregon fans haven't really looked at Wisconsin's schedule. Wisconsin plays a stretch in the middle of the season where they go to Michigan, and then they get Ohio State, and then they get Iowa, and then they go to have to on the road to Oregon, that 4-game stretch. There's not a more physical 4 games where you're going to play Michigan, Ohio State, Iowa, and then have to go on the road to Oregon.
And there's no bye in there anywhere?
No bye. You get a bye right after that sequence and right before it. But gosh almighty, that's a massively tough stretch of games for the Badgers, and they're going to be coming to Oregon potentially losing 2 or 3 games in a row, but more importantly, really getting beaten up, because you get beaten up when you play those teams. It's a bad in the NFL. They talk a lot about scheduled losses, right? Like a long road trip after a couple tough games. This almost feels a bit like a scheduled loss for Wisconsin. Not to mention the fact that Oregon's really good. So it's a tough spot, man. But I know a lot of Badger fans are excited for the trip. I've talked to people on the West Coast that are excited to see the Badgers play in that environment and that situation. And you all know anything can happen in college sports. So I know people are excited for it, but it is a tough spot for the Badgers.
Yeah, I come across a handful of Oregon fans every now and then when I'm talking about, the craziness of Oregon being in the Big Ten, and they're making all these big trips. They're going to go to Rutgers. They're going to do this. Then I got a message from someone who listened to my show from the East Coast. Dude, I'm so stoked. Oregon's coming to Pennsylvania. I live in Pittsburgh. Like, this is great. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess people spread out. I, of all people, know that just because you're an Oregon fan doesn't mean you have to be in the state of Oregon, of course, or even from the state of Oregon, quite frankly. I come across that quite a bit. But the reason...
Before we go past that point, I want to ask you, does it feel normal in the Big Ten? At what point does it feel normal for you guys?
No. Normal, I need at least 3. I might need 5 years, for me personally, before this feels normal. Oregon's got Minnesota at home and Rutgers on the road this year. They go at Iowa after they play Wisconsin. They have a bye, and then they go at Iowa. None of this feels normal. That's going to take me a minute. That is going to take. Are there cool elements? Sure. I've always liked playing Wisconsin, mostly because Oregon's had a lot of success there. It's like one Rose Bowl, the next Rose Bowl last year. Like, I love playing the Badgers, man.
In basketball last year in the Kohl Center, which we talked about.
Yeah, that was a great one. I love that one. Shellstad, ice in his veins, Peyton Pritchard and Kenny Wooten giving you nightmares in the NCAA tournament in 2019.
Bro, why this show's terrible?
You got to bring up Frank Kaminsky at some point. You got Oregon that one time. Anyway, bringing this back to the football game, there are different expectations for Oregon and Wisconsin. I think that, in my view, Brian, Wisconsin is a way outside chance of making the playoff this year. And it's, hey, you got to get back to the standard of Wisconsin, which was make a solid bowl game each year and try and build on that. For Oregon, especially with their schedule, it's playoff or bust. And I'm not national championship or bust. I'm definitely playoff or bust every single year. If you have a 12 or 16 team playoff, there is no reason, barring a horrifically bad stretch of injuries, that Oregon shouldn't be in the playoff. But the reason I said to begin this show that I think this game could be closer than Oregon fans would like it to be is twofold. Number one, games against Wisconsin are always close. You know, I mentioned the 3 football wins. None of them were close. They were by 7 points, 1 point, and 3 points. Like these teams just kind of feel like they always make their way back to playing a close competitive football game. And number two, you touched on this a bit with regards to last year's game. Luke Fickell's going to circle all 4 of these games and know, you need to win the Iowa game. Like that feels like a must win to me for Wisconsin. But between Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, you got to find a way to win one of those. I mean, Fickell's at the point, correct me if I'm wrong, where he's got to start finding some marquee wins to remind the fans, the donor base, and the administration that, yeah, I am the guy that can take this program to the next level and go toe-to-toe with the big boys in the Big Ten, because you miss a bowl game for a second straight year, and you're looking back going, where are the quality wins? What do we have to feel good about in this space? That's how I read it.
No, it's a really good read. That's a really good point. Luke Fickell wasn't brought in to keep the ship running on course. He was brought in to elevate it. Wisconsin was winning games. They brought Luke Fickell in to raise the ceiling, and it hasn't worked. And by the way, we talked about that 4-game stretch. They also have Bama in the non-conference. They have to go down to Bryant-Denny. They also play Indiana. They play Illinois. This is a really tough schedule.
They have Indiana and Illinois in addition to those 4.
Plus Minnesota. It's a tough schedule. Now, I will say this. I think there's a little bit of knee-jerk reaction going on where Wisconsin has been a pretty good program, vacillating between solid to really good for 20-plus years. Like the majority of my adult life, and Indiana's been a dumpster fire. Like Wisconsin has been Indiana, like prime Star Wars movie trilogy type stuff, and Indiana has been like
and Rogue One.
And Rogue One's a great movie. And Indiana's been like Sharknado my whole life, and suddenly they're here and legit, and Wisconsin is like an afterthought. I would hit the pause button on people who make too much out of a 1-year sample size. I think Wisconsin's going to be better this year. The pressure's there. They did a really good job in the portal. They've addressed some needs, and Luke Fickell's recruited really well. Wisconsin still has the infrastructure of a team that went to a bowl game 22 straight years. Like, I wouldn't forget that. And we are in a very what happened last culture, what happened in the last 5 seconds of my life and on Twitter and this. Wisconsin's going to be better this year. They are. I firmly believe that. But, man, it's a tough road to go to Oregon. And I know we got to hit a break here, but I want to ask you, you're at the point where you're in the haves. Like, you live on the Boardwalk Park Place type of part of the Monopoly board. Is just making the playoffs a success? Is that good enough for you if you don't get past that point anymore, considering it's a 12-team playoff? I almost want to hit that after the break for you, because we live in different spots right now, and with those spots comes expectations.
Yeah, that it is a really good and important question for Oregon, and we are going to hit that. We are also going to hit how the biggest strengths of these two teams match up with one another. Plenty more coming on today's show. First, this episode brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier with Monarch Money? It can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. You can be like your own Alfred for Batman, but instead of 2 people, it's 1 people, because you've got everything in that command center? Do you have that one financial goal you've been wanting to reach? Monarch Money is there to help you get over the hump. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Check them out at monarchmoney.com. So to answer your question, Ryan, about is just making the playoff a success, it doesn't feel that way. It is to an extent. Like last year's season, do you categorize that as a failure? My answer is no. It's not a failure of a season. It's a disappointing end to literally one of the best years in the history of Oregon football. It's only the second time they've ever gone 12-0 in the regular season. They won the Big Ten, for goodness sake. But the problem is that last year was year 3 for Dan Lanning, and there is no other way to see this guy than a rising star in college football. He made Oregon better in his first year from the year prior, and he has gotten better as a team and as a staff and him as a head coach every single season. And I don't think they have quite the team they had last year. They're still very good. Getting to the playoff is, to your point, a sign of how Oregon is a have compared to the have-nots in college football. Because if Oregon gets there, let's say they win a home playoff game, which would be electric, and then they lose in the next round to Texas or Penn State or Georgia, somebody like that. Most programs see that as a success. And in the grand scheme of things, it's year 4 for Dan Lanning, and back-to-back playoff appearances is something to hang your hat on. But for Oregon fans, this is not year 3 or year 4. This is year 15, 16, 17 of being a program with national championship aspirations. And so there is a segment of the fan base, and I feel this personally. Like I have to kind of severance my emotions and what is logical. Because what is logical is getting to the playoff as a successful year, but the emotional side of me is it ever going to feel like a great season for Oregon to get to the playoff and not win a national championship? No, because Oregon fans are tired of waiting for it on the whole. Like, I think there are plenty that can recognize, it used to be different in the 80s, 90s, and, for some parts of the early 2000s, and just being able to win 10 plus games every year is really exciting, having a chance. But there are so many fans that have grown up and experienced, hey, Oregon can get to that national championship level. When are they going to get there? And it's the one thing hanging over the program. So I hope that answers your question.
I think it does. And to me, college football reminds me of baseball in a sense, right? Where baseball, the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Dodgers spend so much money. And there's that parallel of I think if you make the national championship game, it's a good game. To me, that's a success. I know you're trying to bring home the hardware, but it does suck some of the joy out of it for you. I remember very distinctly going 8-4 as a Badger fan, going to the Outback Bowl or the Capital One Bowl, and you're playing in Miami or in Arkansas, whatever, and you win that, and you feel really good. Like, what a good year. And Nebraska fans talk about that too, right? Going 8-4 under Solich and losing the joy of being able to go 8-4 to chase the next big thing. As an Oregon fan, you also have to be careful of losing the joy of the process and the regular season if the only outcome is national championship or bust. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. There's a lot of Badger fans that would love that, right?
Yes.
To have that chance. But man, it can be kind of soul-sucking in a different kind of way.
Yeah. Trust me, being an Oregon fan, soul-sucking. That's the term. That is definitely the term. A couple of golf analogies I want to bring up before we start discussing strengths of these two teams for 2025. I've compared Oregon to Rory McIlroy for a long time because Rory McIlroy is one of the greatest golfers in the history of the world. There's no other way to see that. Would you attribute that sort of emotion to him before his Masters win this past year? No. Because what's he doing? He's winning a bunch of tournaments every year that are not majors, that so many guys, every guy except him and a few select others would love to win on tours often as he does. But he was chasing that career Grand Slam. He was chasing that major drought for so long that he was in that upper echelon of, you know what? this is all he seems to care about. This is all people seem to care about when talking about him. It's when is he going to break through and do it? Yeah, sure, he's better than most of the golfers in the world, but when is he going to get into that upper stratosphere because he's capable of doing that? And then what you're saying about, enjoying the process, there was this great article by Max Homa on, I think it was Golf Digest or something, a few years ago that has stuck with me as someone who plays a lot of golf, loves golf, and has been fortunate enough to get very good at golf. The title of the article was, "I no longer enjoy a flushed 7-iron." That hit me so hard. Like, I used to just chase that feeling of hitting the ball in the center of the face. That's not good enough for me anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that is indeed where Oregon is at. Is you used to, my dad went to college, they'd win 2-3 games a year. It was terrible. Winning 8 games, 9 games was, oh my gosh, it's exciting. But you've undergone a shift of expectations, and that brings about a different mentality for fans that can be kind of soul-sucking. In all honesty, it can be. Because when you go into the year trying to accomplish the ultimate goal, or else it's not what you wanted, well, man, it's going to be tough. It'll make it all worth it one day when Oregon does have that breakthrough year. But it is definitely a challenge. So, centering this back to these two teams in 2025, Ryan, I want to throw at you what I think are the two biggest strengths of this Oregon team, and you tell me how you think Wisconsin can respond, and then we'll flip the script to wrap today's show. When I think of this Oregon team, the defensive line is the number one strength. This is a unit that has got NFL talent. They are deep. Everywhere that you look, they are disruptive. We saw that last year in Madison. The defensive line was menacing against this Wisconsin offensive line. I think that is strength number one. Strength number two, I could go in a lot of different directions because there's so many questions, but I love this Oregon receiving core. Absolutely love it. I think Dante Moore will be good. I think the system is proven to generate quality quarterback play no matter who is there, and Dante Moore should have the best season of his young career so far. But how do you feel Wisconsin matches up against the Oregon front four and the wide receivers who can legitimately, I think, hurt you with guys going 6 deep?
Yeah, let's start with the first one. So Wisconsin lost its best left tackle in spring to an ACL.
Not great. Not great, Bob.
Oh, doggone it. Listen, I'll say this. Wisconsin does have a lot of veterans on the offensive line. They have a right tackle that's been there for several years, Riley Mahlman, big guy who's going to play in the NFL. Jake Renfro's a veteran center. They got a guard they really like in Joe Brunner, but there's not a lot of depth. My biggest concern, I think they'll be okay on the offensive line, an above-average offensive line group, which any above-average offensive line group is going to struggle against Oregon. If you're not great on the O-line, you're going to struggle against the depth of speed and athleticism. Oregon's recruited that spot incredible the last several years. So if you're not great there, you're going to struggle. Wisconsin will be okay if they don't have injury issues. And again, we just talked about that gauntlet they got to roll through to get to Oregon. If they have a couple injuries, they didn't have a ton of depth to begin with, and they lost a stud left tackle. Kevin Haywood tore his ACL, and he's just been a guy people have been raving about. So that one is a struggle. Like, it's not going to be ideal. They do feel a little bit better about some of the veterans there. They brought in a couple transfer portal guys they like, but I think that'll be a struggle, quite frankly. When you start talking about the receiver core, I think Wisconsin is more positioned to fare well there. They have two really veteran cornerbacks, Nizer Forkrin, who they're still kind of fighting a legal battle. Outside of the legal battle you and I talked about with Xavier, they're fighting another one to get Nizer Forkrin back. We don't know where it's going yet. God love Wisconsin, man. Wisconsin's fighting the fight. But if they get him back, they're going to have two really veteran cornerbacks. Rico Hallman last year, 2 years ago, picked off 6 passes. They have a really solid veteran secondary with veteran safeties, veteran cornerbacks. They're a little more athletic there than they usually are at Wisconsin. The secondary is probably the strength of the defense outside of inside linebackers. So I think they're positioned there pretty well. But that defensive line is going to give Wisconsin troubles. They did last year. I think they're going to again this year. So that means you got to adjust offensively, keep a tight end in, keep the H-back in, maybe throw a little quicker. That one feels like something where Oregon could once again really take advantage of in this matchup.
Well, it's time to put the shoe on the other foot, as it were. Ryan will play prosecutor. I will play witness. And we shall see how Oregon might match up against the strengths of this Wisconsin team. And, of course, we will dabble into the quarterback talk.
So one of the unique was because when you think of Wisconsin, what do you think of? You think of big people, you think of cheese, you think of lakes, you think of running backs, right? Like good beer.
I think of Melvin Gordon and Monty Ball running 26 power.
You think of Ron Dane, which is right back there on the
yeah.
team, right? Wisconsin has a unique and interesting receiver group this year. So Vinny Anthony is maybe the most underrated dude in the Big Ten. And listen, every Big Ten host is going to say my guy's super underrated. Vinny Anthony averaged 17-something yards per catch last year. He was ahead of Jeremiah Smith in yards per catch against man coverage. He's really good. He's going to be an NFL guy, really good speed, great hands. And on the other side, they got Jaden Ballard, who they brought in from Ohio State. 4'4" guy, great size. And in the slot, they have Trechka Kahuna who they really like. The Badgers receiver corps is going to be really good this year, I think, especially for what people have been used to from Wisconsin. It's more athletic. It's experienced. They have multiple options. I think that's the first strength when you look at Wisconsin. And then the second one is they've done a really good job revamping their front seven. They brought in a lot of size. They got a couple guys they really like there. The inside linebackers are probably the stars of the defense. Tackett Curtis, who they brought in from USC a couple years ago, former 4-star blue chip guy. And then Christian Allegro, another inside linebacker, is probably the best player on the defense, period. So I think the two strengths, when you look at Wisconsin, it's a deep and explosive passing game or receiving group, that could help Billy Edwards Jr. in the passing game. And then the front seven is bigger, stronger, and more athletic.
Well, you brought up Jeremiah Smith, and I mean, Oregon was so good at covering that guy last year that anybody who's in that realm, he's just no way he could have success because, whoo, boy, Oregon put the clamps on him all season long. So the secondary is one of my favorite position groups, not because I'm anticipating it being one of the best, but it easily could be. It is a position of mystery. The secondary and Dante Moore, who's expected to start at quarterback, to me are one and the same. I see the potential, and not just in, but mostly driven by the high school recruiting ranking, is very real. This secondary has got a ridiculous amount of blue chip talent everywhere you look. The only surefire starter, in my view, is a guy who Wisconsin fans might be familiar with, Dylan Thieneman from Purdue, who has been a starter the last couple of years, was one of the top players in the transfer portal. Of the 5 DBs Oregon's base personnel will have on the field, that's the only guy I can tell you with 100% certainty will be starting if so at good. Full health.
He's so good. Do you feel bad taking from Purdue? Like, is there an element of like, can you just let them have their one? Like, if you look at NCAA roster, it's like their 190 plus guy.
Well, no, is the short answer. We've been waiting decades to win a national championship, man. Like that, feeling bad for everybody else. No, we're past that. We're way past that. Just get the hardware, Danimal. The secondary has got so much potential. There's not a lot of experience, and there could be a little more experience at one of the corner spots if Jalil Florence winds up starting, who was an early recruiting win for Dan Lanning and company. He and Josh Connerly both came in that 22 cycle when they had just gotten on board as the coaching staff in early calendar year 2022. And Florence is a guy who, if he's healthy, that's a starting corner. He is 6'2"-ish. Probably depends on whether or not he's got cleats on and how generous the communication staff is being and such. But he's 6'1", 6'2", looks the part. He was a starting corner in 2023 as a true sophomore, and he got hurt at the end of that season and didn't play in 2024 really at all. But he's back, and in the spring game, looked healthy and he did have a non-contact jersey on because he was nursing like a hand or some. He's expected to be fine. If he's healthy, I think he starts, and he's a good player. The other corner, I think, will be Ife Obadegu, who is one of the crown jewel DB recruits of the class of 2024. Redshirt freshman. They love his physical traits and what he brings on the outside. Had a forced fumble in the spring game, and the other most notable part that we've seen from him was in that spring game, the quarterbacks just didn't throw at him at all, and that I think is the greatest sign of respect you can give a defensive back. But at the other safety spot, at the nickel spot, gosh, there's so many options, and I won't go into detail on every single name that could be in there now. There are a lot of interesting players. Maybe 5-star true freshman Naeem Offord is ready to go, or maybe he has to, kind of redshirt a season like everybody else. So really interested, but also excited for the Wisconsin game because this young, inexperienced secondary that has a lot of talent will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games under its belt by the time they meet. If this were the Northwestern slot, I'd be more concerned, but I think second half of the year, a lot of guys will have really gotten their footing, will be playing good ball. And then the front seven for Wisconsin is going up against an Oregon offensive line that should be great. Should. Emphasis on should. You lost 4 starters from last year. A Johnny Cornelius, and I actually don't think, I think Marcus Harper was injured when they played Wisconsin, and a combination of Kavika Rogers and Davey Uli stepped in and did really well overall in that game. But you've got a new left tackle, you've got a new right tackle, a new left guard, a new right guard. Now, if you only were to return one position, you'd want it to be center, and Iapani Lalaulu, or Poncho as he's known, is probably by the end of the year going to be a candidate for the Remington Award. I don't know that he wins it like Jackson Powers Johnson did 2 years ago. He'll be a candidate for it. So again, they haven't had any snaps together because you've got 4 new starters. But in game 8, we saw that Oregon O-line go from disaster in the first 2 weeks to Joe Moore Award finalist by the end of the year. I think this unit has the talent and experience to do just that.
Well, that doesn't help me.
Sorry, were you looking for man? The O-line blows. They haven't recruited. They made no portal additions. Like,
I don't know, like a Rambo. Like, yeah, like at least this one spot we're not sure on.
No, I think Oregon is 8 deep on the offensive line. Not joking.
But listen, that's what it is when you have not unlimited, but you have in the realm of college football and your unlimited resources. It is what it is. Like, you're going to be deeper. You're going to reload better. You're going to reload quicker. It is what it is. And, I think it leads into why this is such a tough battle for Wisconsin on the end of that 4-game stretch they have. I do think Wisconsin's better at quarterback. I know we want to hit quarterbacks here.
Yeah. Let's close with that.
Yeah. I live in a small town called Shell Lake, and it's only pertinent for the fact that my closest neighbors are loons. There's like 1,000 people that live in my town. I think I could still throw a rock and find better quarterback play than the Badgers have. This is titled as "Is Wisconsin better at quarterback than in 2024?" Yeah, they are.
Billy Edwards Jr. had a great time at Autzen last year. Let me pull up his stats real quick.
Do you remember Braden Locke? So here's the thing. Braden Locke, Wisconsin was, I think, 16th in the Big Ten in passer rating. I'm going off numbers on the top of my head. He wasn't mobile. He wasn't very accurate. Billy Edwards Jr. was better at Maryland than Braden Locke was at Wisconsin. Billy Edwards Jr. also had a really bad offensive line at Maryland, a really, really bad offensive line. Talked to Locked On Terps about it, and he just kind of laughed when I asked about the offensive line at Maryland last year. He's going to have more help this year, better offensive line, and he just brings more physicality and size and the ability to move than Braden Locke. So one thing we talked about, and this was on our Locked On Big Ten show, the Badgers aren't going to go from terrible to great at quarterback with Billy Edwards Jr. It's not what it is. But can they go from terrible to okay? If they had okay quarterback play last year in a game that was really close in Madison, do they win that game? Maybe. I'm not going to say they do. I think Oregon played with their food a little bit last year in Camp Randall. But gosh, if you have okay quarterback play, I think Wisconsin maybe wins that game.
Yeah, they could. It's tough when the D-line is dominating like it was. I mean, Mateo was unblockable.
Yeah, he was.
I don't think either tackle had an answer for Mateo Uiagalelei off the edge. He mostly went at the right tackle, but I mean, the dude was everywhere, and he wasn't the only defensive lineman having a good day. Billy Edwards, by the way, with Maryland a season ago, 22 of 44 passing the ball, 206 yards, a touchdown, 2 picks. He was sacked twice, and he was stripped, and Oregon took that ball back to the house for a touchdown.
Sounds better to me.
What?
Sounds better to me.
Yeah. I remember going into the game last year, I remember asking another Oregon media member, like, so what do you think about Billy Edwards? He is one of the quarterbacks of all time.
That's crazy.
Or sorry, about Braden Locke. He said that about Braden Locke going into the Wisconsin game. I was like, ouch, really? And they're like, yeah, I look at his stats, and then I started doing my game prep, and I was going, yeah, this is...
I'll say this to end on Edwards, and then we'll hit it over to Moore. If nothing else, Edwards is bigger. He's 6'4", and he's physical, and he can run. Right?
He made some good throws in that game. Good throws.
And he did not have a ton of help on Maryland. Not that he's going to play at Alabama.
That Felton guy was legit. He got drafted, I'm pretty sure, at receiver. Yeah. He was good.
He did, but he's going to have more help this year, especially in the offensive line. And again, I just think it's easier. You mentioned the defense line for Oregon. It's much easier to hit a stationary target. Like, Billy Edwards can move a little bit. He can run a little bit. And it gives the Badgers an element they didn't have last year. A lot of people inside the Badgers athletic department, inside that building, are really excited about just the veteran poise and the size and some of the mobility that Billy's going to bring. Again, not a star. Like I mentioned this last year about Tyler Van Dyke. You don't stay in college for 5 years as a quarterback if you're a star. You just don't. But can he get him to okay? I think he can get him to okay, which for Badger fans is a big deal. That's a win for us right now.
Yeah, I'll close with these thoughts for Wisconsin fans on Dante Moore. My Oregon everydayers are probably well-versed in my opinions on Dante, and it's hard to not like the guy because the college highlights are few and far between. The ones that are there are special. I mean, when he has a clean pocket and makes a throw down the field, man, he throws a beautifully catchable ball. And he can make every throw on the field. He can drop his arm angles. He's not a runner like Dylan Gabriel or Bo Nix, but he can move if he needs to. He can throw on the run. He, could scramble for a first down on 3rd and 4. He's not Phillip Rivers back there lumbering around, just like trying not to injure himself with every step. But he's a solid athlete, but he was a 5-star recruit because of his arm talent. It is really special. And this, again, game 8 compared to game 1, I expect to see a better version of him, be more comfortable in the system. But I love what he did for himself in his career. He went to UCLA, got thrown into the fire, got the sense it was falling apart, which it was. Chip Kelly left. And he says, you know what? I could go somewhere and start. There were plenty of places that would have taken him out of the portal, and just because he was a 5-star recruit, would have said, come and start for us right here, right now. And he said, no. They wanted me up there in Eugene to be a starting quarterback. I can go learn behind a veteran for a year, understand the system, get myself fully prepared to be a starting quarterback. And if he maximizes his potential, yeah, Heisman finalist. That's the upper ceiling. And this is an offensive system that has produced a Heisman finalist quarterback each of the last 2 years. Nobody in college football can say that. And you do that with two very different guys. Dylan Gabriel, the short, scrappy gamer, and Bo Nix, the former 5-star recruit with first-round NFL traits. And Dante Moore is kind of in between those two. And I think the ability for him to succeed is dependent upon him. He's got a system. I think his offensive line will be good. His receivers are great. He's got one of the best tight ends in college football. He'll have a good running game. His defense, his coaching, he's got everything. Like, at the end of the day, it just comes down to him. Does the kid have what it takes? This is a situation for him to succeed, and I expect him to do well. I think he will be a Heisman finalist candidate, or more likely to do so in 2026 should he return to the Ducks. But overall, yeah, if you can't get after it, that's the biggest thing. Is he struggled at UCLA when he was under pressure, and the O-line was pretty bad. And the biggest upgrade he could have from UCLA to Oregon is the offensive line. And so if Wisconsin cannot get pressure on Dante Moore at Autzen Stadium, long day. Long day for the Badgers is my suspicion. If they can get pressure, we can have another nail biter. Why the heck not? But if you let Dante Moore sit and slice and dice, the weapons are, even without Evan Stewart, who's out for the year with an injury, this is an elite array of weapons that he has to throw the ball to.
Let me ask you this really quick on the way out. I know we're running long, but I have a penchant for doing that, unfortunately, at times.
You and me both. You and me both.
Let me ask you
I always tell myself this is going to be a 25-minute show, and then 31 minutes later, I'm done.
I did that the other day, and it went an hour long. That's
don't tell Blackerby.
He'll find out, I'm sure. Someone will flag it.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, because I think everything we said here is true, right? Like Oregon is justifiably one of the best teams in the country, and there's strengths everywhere. The recruiting's elite. I love Lanning. What's the one thing, if you're a Wisconsin fan, or for you, if you're an Oregon fan, outside of the Wisconsin matchup, what's the one thing that maybe you need some Ambien to sleep at night about for Oregon? Like, what's the one thing you look at and you're like, gosh, if I have to point to one thing, one crack potentially in the dam, I don't love this.
I'm my dad's son. I don't need anything to sleep. The one thing, I need the defense to be better in big games against really good teams. And no disrespect, that's not Wisconsin this year. I'm not taking them lightly, to be sure. But I mean, the one thing in the back of my mind is, hey, Dan Lanning's a defensive coach. And for the last few years, in the biggest games, the fault has not been on the offense. And now in the Rose Bowl, it was two-sided, but that got out of hand quickly because defense could not get stops. But you look at last year's games against playoff teams, they gave up over 30 points every time. That's got to improve. So I think it's the situational defense that last year against Wisconsin was really good. And the defense took a step forward, being able to do it against teams like Wisconsin or Purdue or UCLA or whoever, because they weren't doing it as often, in the years prior. But the next thing is, let's say Wisconsin shocks us all and they're 7-1, ranked inside the top 10. Now I'm going to look at that game differently and say, okay, here's another test. In addition to Penn State, in addition to maybe Indiana or USC or Washington, somebody like that, here's another test in a big game to go out and prove your defense can hold a playoff caliber team under 30 points. They have not done that. Boise, Penn State, Ohio State twice, all over 30 points. It's not. I don't think it's a talent issue on the field. I know it's not a talent issue on the field. Coaching staff has got to be better, and they have improved each of the last couple of years. I think they will again. But that's the biggest thing for me with the staff and the program is, hey, in the biggest games, is the defense going to show up and not just rely on the offense to bail it out? That's where I'm at. We'll close it there for today. Ryan Harings, Locked On Badgers. I'm Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On Ducks. This has been a Locked On crossover edition. Hope you enjoyed it. I know we certainly did. We'll see you next time. And until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.